We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some anomalistic motion. Over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Why it could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Welcome, everybody, to another live edition of Anomaly Now, streaming to you live from Austin, Texas. I am Smiles Lewis, and you are tuned into the free weekly half-hour news roundup show from the Anomaly Archives, a 501c3 nonprofit, aka the Scientific Anomaly Institute. And tonight with me is, of course, our weekly co-host Mark Jackson, and our newest board member, Ed Conroy. Hey, Ed, great to see you.
Hey, Ed. Hey, AJ. Glad you can make it.
Thank you for joining us. Let me just move some things around here. There we go. Wait a minute. All right. Make an Ed sandwich there. Well, I am so excited and exhausted from another day of working towards this big emergency fundraiser that we're doing with a whole bunch of amazing folks, and we may in fact have some of the presenters that are joining us for this Saturday's first inaugural STREAMATHON emergency fundraiser that we're doing for the Anomaly Archives. As I've said on previous shows, our efforts are to raise upwards of $20,000 to cover our estimated annual budget. This will ensure that we can continue at the location that we have been at the past. Well, it'll be 3 years in January 2021. And we really like our location. And despite the downtime that we've experienced this past 9 months or so during the COVID lockdown crisis, we really want to stay there, and we need folks' help. So I really appreciate everybody who's helping spread the word and who's donated their time and their intellect. It really touches my heart to know that so many folks have already pitched in with such a wide variety of efforts, including especially the speakers, because we know everybody's hurting in this time, and it's not easy for anybody. And we really we hope that besides our audience helping us with hopeful funds and donations, that they will also take some time and some energy and some money to help our presenters as well. And besides the 20 plus speakers that we're going to have every Saturday from now till the end of the year, we're also going to have a wide variety of interesting anomalous music and some interesting films and videos to show you as well. I believe we have another person here. I don't know if it's premature to bring him on, but I'm going to give it a try. Walter, I'm about to add you to the stream. Walter, okay. Are you there?
Yes, I am, but can you hear me?
I can hear you. How are you doing, Walter?
Good. The only the audio works on this device I'm using, so it looks like Saturday I'll probably switch over to my laptop.
Okay, well, we can get with you and figure that all out. But I really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Sure, thanks.
It's great to hear your voice, even if I don't get to see your face.
Welcome, Walter. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's a pleasure. You're somebody who I've been following since learning of your interest in these subjects, and I guess your expertise extends before you really became a public figure in the community itself. I don't know if you are feeling up to giving a brief introduction at the moment, I would ask you to, if that's not too much to ask.
No, sure. Just the short version is I spent 19 and a half years in the national security field, starting with the FBI, then going into the Air Force, where I was a special agent with the OSI, the legendary and notorious OSI, I'll add. And then I worked for another organization in counterterrorism. And essentially, how it prepared me for this kind of stuff is, I'm an investigator and intel collector, a researcher by training and experience and by nature. So I think it fits in doing what I'm doing now in the community. So that's it.
Right on. And it was our mutual friend, Greg Bishop, who is also going to be one of the presenters at this illustrious STREAMATHON series, as I said, every Saturday between now and the end of the year. Greg is a good friend of everybody's, pretty much. He's one of those really, really awesome, nice guys who just finds his way around and has done some really interesting thinking on the subject like yourself. And for a while, you were practically a co-host there at his Radio Misterioso radio show.
Yes, I was. I was joining him just about every Sunday night for a couple of years there. And when gas got to be too expensive, because I live about 70 some miles away from from where he was doing the show. So it was a little bit of a trek for me, but it was worth it.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate it, and always appreciated your input to the show. I've actually had a number of people who are getting psyched about this series of events, specifically say, "Oh, I can't wait to hear more from Walter." One of the other speakers actually said, he just seems like the kind of guy I could have a great conversation with, and I'm like, yes, I bet you could. You've written on so many different topics, and you've gone into so many interesting avenues with what some might term speculative fiction, but which you're always very quick to say you're not trying to convince anybody about this, that, or the other. You're just exploring these ideas. And maybe you could tell folks about the various paths that you've written about.
Well, what's interesting to me, and I say this to people all the time, is my books, as diverse in topic as they might seem, they actually have a couple of threads connecting all of them together. And truly one book led to another. I started out with the Latitude 33, the book about the esoteric engineering of Disneyland. And that led to research that led me to the Empire of the Wheel stuff. And I spent a few years diving into that, and that ended up being 3 books. And those 3 books led me to the Secret Missions series, because the Juan Cabrillo and Joan of Arc stuff emerged during the early stages of the Empire of the Wheel investigation. And each one of those books led to the next. And so I found it really interesting that that diversity, it's still all connected. And when you get into the books and hear me talk about it in greater detail elsewhere, you see what those threads are. So for me, it's just been this one big journey, with this stuff. And I just keep pulling the threads and following where it leads me.
It's interesting, Walter, that you're exactly right. You have access to information that leads to other information and other books, and you really have to have some infrastructure where you can continue down those paths. And I think that that's really what Miles is trying to do with the archives here, and promoting, the sustainability where you can create those threads and continue down those paths, because there are dead ends if you allow them. And I think that, we have a real opportunity here to, like yourself and others, where we can continue to create those threads if we can preserve these sort of archives, et cetera. So thank you for that.
Sure.
And, one of the fun books of yours that I've read is the time travel book that involves the carousels as a time machine that I really enjoyed a lot, and that ties into, if I'm remembering correctly, the Empire of the Wheel series, or at least elements of it.
Yes. In fact, that is one of my actual novels. It's kind of funny. I forgot when Empire of the Wheel came out, somebody assumed it was a novel, and I had to correct them and say, no, that's a nonfiction book. Clearly, when you read it, there's speculation in it, but it's not a novel. Novel is a work of dramatic fiction. But in the time travel novel, I wrote that original version at the same time that Rick and I were writing the first volume of the Empire of the Wheel series. And if you look at the latest edition, you'll notice names have been changed. I had to go back and change the actual person's names from the actual Empire of the Wheel events to other names because I had subsequently sold the rights. It's in development to be a dramatic TV series right now, the whole Empire of the Wheel thing.
Very cool.
And because I sold the rights, it was wise for me to go back and change the name. So in the latest best revision of that novel, you'll notice that the actual names are a little different, but you get the idea. And it still takes place, part of it in San Bernardino, and it's still essentially the same events, but mixed with some other stuff. But my fiction is, and I point this out to people, my fiction is always an extension of my research and nonfiction interests, even my pulp novels, except for, I think, The Devil's Mill, which is a kind of a crime. Well, it is a crime pulp. Except for that one, all of my pulps are either based on stuff that I'm interested in researching, or in the case of one of them, my career experiences. So even the fiction, particularly the time travel novel, but even the fiction has stuff in there that readers of my nonfiction will enjoy and recognize.
Well, I was pleased to meet you and to hear some of your ideas at the Secret Space program that was in Austin, but actually was outside Austin in Bastrop. This was, I think, I can't remember if it was 2018.
2015.
15 was it? Now. Oh my God!
5 years ago, and
feels like yesterday. That was the big flood. There was the massive flooding here in Central Texas, even in my house here. Unfortunately,
well, I took the train because I like train travel, so I took the train from California, and the weather was beautiful till we hit Texas, right? And my train, which was supposed to get in at like, I think 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock the day before the event, before I spoke, actually didn't roll in till after 11 p.m. And by the time Marge picked me up and I got to where I could get some sleep, I gave that speech on just a couple of hours sleep and exhaustion from that train ride, but still, it was one of my favorite presentations that I've given, and that was a great audience. Those events were really ginning up something interesting and valuable. But as we know, what happened right about the time that event was going on, and that was the third that they had put together, and it was drawing a great crowd. It was drawing great speakers, and I know I'm including myself in that company, as on the side there, but the other speakers, really educated, smart people, but at the same time, the ridiculous so-called secret space program whistleblowers were really showing up and gaining popularity. And quite frankly, it kind of derailed any serious secret space program discussion or research.
Yeah, I had forgotten that kind of is around the time when that started up, and it's interesting that first of all, this particular conference series, it was really well run. It was one of the most top notch ones I've been to. As far as they were streaming the events, which wasn't that common back then. Now
right.
We're in a much different situation, and it was it's a top notch event in so many different ways. And yes, and they were really clearly they did not want to be considered a UFO conference, which on the one hand I both understand, and also I'm like, oh, but come on, but they were really like trying to distance themselves from all the baggage of the paranormal and UFO scene, and this is that tightrope I've always walked, and of recognizing and respecting those that want to try for a more scientific approach and want to steer clear of the more woo-woo stuff. But honestly, humanity, and we're emotional woo-woo machines,
Sure.
and and the paranormal is just a bad moniker for what science is here for. So. That's an interesting point. Actually, and when you mentioned the trains, I think weren't you were producing some little videos back then, and you're still doing your YouTube channel, but I think you had some of your train travel in one of those videos.
Yes, I did. I had my video camera with me, and in the days before I had a smartphone, and I was recording anytime I'd go on the road, and there was a funny little video I did going and returning home. And it was a lot of fun. I still plan to do those as soon as both this COVID thing passes by. And of course, as you might have known, I went through cancer treatment this year. And so I've had the double whammy with not being able to do anything. But I look at it as timing it right, because, nobody's been able to do anything. I went through this during COVID.
So. Walter, I'll ask you, from that 2018 experience and where we're at today, with the emergence of the Space Force and, the emergence of all this other stuff. Can you give us a little nugget that we can look forward to, at this conference that Miles is working so hard to put together? Do you think, what would be a statement, just something very brief to create some continuity between where you were in 2018 and where we're finding ourselves at here with this emergence of the Space Force, the Artemis Accords, etc.?
Right. Well, in my opinion, from my perspective, it really does not look good for the SSP field discussion, speculative research and such, because I honestly think that Space Force is going to turn out to essentially be the publicization, if that's a word, of what we've been doing secretly. Now, if you look closely at my research and my presentations and what I've written and stated, particularly in my book, Shimmering Light, I lay out, it isn't just speculation. The U.S. Air Force was spearheading a manned space program dating back to the early 1950s. NASA was stood up in 1958, late 1958, October of that year. And that's when NASA took over the already pre-existing Mercury space program, that the movie and the TV series The Right Stuff is based on. It tells the story of. That was a U.S. Air Force program before it ever became a NASA program. A lot of people don't know that. And when you look at the records of the day and what the Air Force was doing, we were already engaged in my opinion, certainly a sensitive development of space travel, if not secret at that time. But I think in 1958, the military program was parallel to what NASA was doing, essentially, with the technology and stuff. Okay, but I think the military, the Air Force, never stopped with their manned space program. I just think NASA, took over the public part of it. And I think sometime in the and this is just a wild ass guess, in the 1970s, maybe early 80s is when the military program probably started moving ahead of the civilian program. By no means have I ever thought that the military has this Starfleet level, ridiculous advanced starship thing. No, not at all. I think it's mostly been parallel to the kinds of things you see NASA doing, but more like the space plane stuff they were developing going back to the 50s and in the early 60s. Now, all that to say that I truly am convinced that the whole SSP discussion and research, and I know you asked me to keep this short. I was getting to the short part. The whole thing is kind of a moot issue now, because I think that anything that we would have been discussing in digging out what was the real secret space program is now just going to be folded into the history of what Space Force will be. And eventually we may learn what they were doing prior to 2018. So it kind of, in a way, killed the subject for guys like us who were trying to dig out a secret thing.
Well, a bit of a primer to the conferences that Miles is putting together. You guys, everybody listening, this is the kind of content that we're going to try to unpack in all this. And again, Walter, thank you for adding just a little bit of a tidbit for where I think that this entire conference is going to go. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Ed, looked like you were about to.
And, maybe if we want to get into this a little more later, but so what do you think, Walter, about the allegations from Michael Salla and others that Forrestal, with Kennedy by his right side, went into German labs and got anti-gravity vehicles that the Germans had been developing and brought them over to the United States, vehicles that had presumably been developed with clairvoyant information from the Vril Society and all of that. It's a very fascinating story, but I'd like to take on it.
Well, honestly, I don't think much of it because when you do the research into that, you find out that this whole Nazi flying saucer thing has its honest origin with post-war neo-Nazi writer and I don't know if you'd call him a journalist or whatever, but a guy named Zundel. 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 And this Nazi flying saucer thing can be traced to him. Now I know Zundel was also the guy that is brought into discussion of the bell, but yeah, it's my understanding that that's his name, if I'm getting it right. But
I think
it does trace back to that. And I think a lot of the stuff we hear about, so-and-so Forrestal did this, Kennedy did that. I think a lot of it's just apocryphal tales and in some cases stuff that people made up. And unfortunately, we have that in our field. We have a chunk of the audience that is willing to listen to anything that's in the vein of what they want to hear. And they don't really dig into the sources. They don't really question things to the extent that they should. So I don't think there's much. Here's the thing. Nazis messing with anti-gravity technology and research, sure, I have no problem with them doing that. Forrestal maybe getting his hands on something, during the Kennedy administration, them getting their hands on something. Sure, I'm in that camp that thinks that's what Kecksburg was probably, the product of. But as far as the Nazi, like the Hannibal and stuff, it's nonsense. It's not true. And unfortunately, people have made stuff up since then purporting to trace it back to things that were done by the Vril Society or said by the Vril Society. And so they say, well, wait a minute, it dates back to such and such. And it's no, the fact is it only dates back to the post-war era. And pretty much all that other stuff you hear has been made up to back up, the story further. And I know it's a popular thing, but I just, as someone who's looked at it and researched the stuff, I don't think much of it.
Well, thanks for your take on that, Walter. Right.
That's definitely my take on it, and backed up by what I've seen.
And I remember actually one of the years ago in the 90s watching with another person that's going to be one of the presenters at the conference is my anthropology friend Susan Lepselter. She did her dissertation here at the University of Texas on the alien abduction phenomena. She was researching it and writing it at the height of the abduction wave of the 90s, and we one night we watched together this amazing documentary. I've been trying to find it. I can't remember the name of it, but it had lots of CGI graphics. This would have been early 90s CGI graphics. And it was all about this idea. And it was very compelling, but maybe that was also because it had really good special effects. But at the end of it, we both kind of looked at each other and went, wow, that felt really convincing. And we there was this pause, and then we're like, and I wonder what their agenda is, because it really casts the Nazis in a good light. And, and I think, I take your point, Walter. And Ed, I think this is an important issue, because I think one of my areas is, the true foes versus the UFOs, the FUFAUX, the false faux UFOs, and this idea of, there is a true UFO phenomena, and we can argue about what the nature of it is, but some part of it is the imitation of the phenomena. And who's imitating it? Well, humans, human organizations, governments, religions, and other institutions, sometimes highly funded, sometimes just monks making tulpas. I don't know. But the point is, we do have to always analyze the agendas of those giving us the stories and this information. And while I believe Ernst Zundel as one of our viewers confirmed. Ernst Zundel was I believe he's still in prison if he's even still alive, because he was convicted of hate crime and as far as like the promotion of these Nazi ideologies, and as you say, he seems to be the main purporter of or instigator of these ideas, but and without getting into the issue of whether or not people should be imprisoned for ideology, but unless they're actually calling for the death of the genocide. But I think he has pretty much said exactly what you said, that this was a recruitment tool, and that's I think the real danger there. But again, I find it a fascinating subject, and actually one of the people, I don't know if you met him for the first time at that Secret Space conference, but Joseph Farrell is of course written a lot about these kinds of this crossover issues and so forth.
Oh no, I've been good friends with Joseph since 2004.
Oh, okay.
2004 at one of David Childress's events, and the thing about the Nazi UFO thing, what I did find, and I've written about this, is what there is reason to propose or speculate that there was some esoteric organization involvement in what led to the development of whatever the bell was. See, and because the bell gets into gravity, anti-gravity stuff, and the like, people have made that leap to the Nazi UFO and the Hannibal. And when they look at, hey, what was the Vril Society doing and looking into, and how did that influence what the Nazis did? Well, what that society and what other occultists were doing, German occultists and esoteric types were doing, was definitely looking into things that, in my opinion, from what I've seen, led more to what the bell was, not Nazi flying saucers. And I have problems also with the Nazis were in touch with extraterrestrial beings story. That's just more of the same post-war stuff that people are just grabbing onto. And because, like you said, you watch something that's compelling, but that doesn't mean it's true. And as compelling as something might be, we have to look deeper. I did that with my dad's story, and that ended up being the book Shimmering Light. Since 1974, my dad had told me this very compelling story about these underground people that were a different civilization and all this stuff, and that, he told me he had been briefed in on Roswell and such. Well, finally in 2015 and 16, I decided that I really needed to dig in and do a full-on, investigation of his story. And what I found is that it could just as easily, if not more likely, been a layer of false narrative placed through the U.S. Air Force's very historically documented application of MKUltra to suppress a very classified project he was working on. And I go into the details as to why I think that's possible and all that stuff in that book. But as much as I wanted to believe my dad's compelling story on the face of it, I still had to look at it as an objective investigator. And, I found stuff that it could more likely be, even though I don't completely count it out.
I'm still working on that book, so no spoilers.
I will mention, though, Walter, you said you were friends with Joseph Farrell, and, the work between Catherine Austin Fitz and him in terms of the missing trillions and all like that. But Catherine has very publicly come out and said that when she audited the budgets for various government agencies, I think she was in HUD and all like that. Yeah. But she found that the industrial elevator and the boring companies represented a significant fraction of those budgets with no real documentation as to, what they were doing and where these projects were leading. So this notion of having underground bases and very elaborate and interconnected systems below the surface of the earth, like that is validated from outside sources. I'm not saying that there's any connection to any sort of secret societies or whatnot, but that's where I think a lot of people start making these notional connections between the two of them. One of them can be very real, and then the other one is where you kind of fill in the rest of the space with whatever you want to do.
Right, and that's what you have to be careful of doing. I mean, Catherine, is spot on, I think, with what she's found, and we know for a fact. Just look at the books of Richard Sauter. It's very well documented that going back to the late 1940s, we know what the government and the Department of Defense have been constructing underground. And when you look at what they were doing, now going on 70 years ago, you got to wonder 30 years ago, what were they doing underground? So absolutely, these things are there, but we have to be careful, as you say, how far we leap out. We have to identify when we are speculating, which is something I try to do very clearly with my stuff is, okay, here's where I'm speculating, here's where I'm not, because here's the sources. And this is all fun stuff. I mean, that's why we're here. I mean, it's not just, that we feel like we're digging up important information. It's fun to dig into this stuff. It's exciting, intellectually stimulating. And I think that's where a lot of people, unfortunately, use that as the diving board into their own, going off into their own deep end with, some of the assumptions from there. I'm one of these that I think there's extraterrestrials that have come to this planet. I think they still do. I'm not one of those either or people. I think absolutely there's extraterrestrial UFOs. Absolutely they come to this planet. Could some of them be underground? Sure, why not? But what I try to do is on specific cases, when people point to, this or, Dulce or Area 51 or something, I try to look at the individual case and try to, find the information to determine, well, is there something to the wild assertion, or is it, more likely explained by something a little more down to earth, in its origin. And I think we need to do that. And a lot of people just like to jump to the fun thing and let that cover it all.
Thank you.
Well, we're already at the half-hour mark, a little bit over, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really appreciate you coming out, Walter. I did want to give folks a little bit more information about what we're starting this Saturday, November 21st, starting at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, and for every Saturday at about 1 p.m. Central Standard Time from now until the end of the year, the Anomaly Archives, you can find out more about us, 501c3 nonprofit, over at AnomalyArchives.org. We're going to be doing this STREAMATHON fundraiser. This is an emergency situation. We're trying to raise our annual budget and to stay in our current location. And you can find all the information about this event at the AnomalyArchives.org website. It's set up to show you the STREAMATHON information, including the schedule. Here is just the list of the people who've agreed to participate and that we are currently in the process of scheduling. We've got the schedule for this coming Saturday, which of course features Walter Bosley talking about the amazing Del Shao airship mystery and the Nimza legacy. This is something that he's been investigating for some time now. And we've also got Texas cryptozoologist Ken Gerhard giving a talk on the Loch Ness Monster and other aquatic cryptids, and a newcomer to the scene who's very invigorating in her interest and her ideas, very much a Keelian, someone who's kind of coming at this from a John Keel perspective, is Azalea Edgar, who's going to be talking about orb phenomena as a cross-field anomaly. I'm fascinated by that idea because, of course, the oldest traditions in human civilizations is this idea that non-corporeal consciousness often manifests in the form of balls of light. And gee, so many UFOs and paranormal phenomena revolve around balls of light. So, and then later on, we've got Paul Kimball from Canada giving us ghosts, shadow beings, demons, and other high strangeness on Canada's East Coast. And then he's going to be graciously streaming for us a couple of episodes, I think 3 episodes of his Haunted TV series that he's been doing for a while now. Very interesting stuff. We've got the beginnings of the schedules for each Saturday coming up. And then if you go further down the page, we've got the actual bios of each of our presenters, anybody a variety of people, including Tim Banal, Greg Bushett, as we mentioned. There's Walter, and Lauren Coleman has sent along a video for us. And there's our board member, Ed Conroy. and a whole bunch of other folks that we hope that you'll go and check out at the website. And down further is information about some of the music and musicians that we'll be featuring, as well as the movies, including a screening of the fantastic Fortean film, The Hill and the Hole, based on a Fritz Lieber short story. There's Miguel Red Pill Junkie, who did the new artwork for us that you'll be seeing around. It's really awesome, showing the archives in a very fun light. And so much more from former military remote viewer Paul Smith, and just so much more. You can find out more about that over at AnomalyArchives.org. And again, so this is all the part of the Anomaly Archives Emergency Streamathon fundraiser for 2020. Really hope folks will turn out, and even more hope that they'll open their purses and their wallets if they can afford to. Obviously, this is a very tough time for everybody, and we don't want anybody to hurt themselves while trying to help us. So I guess any final words, folks? Walter, what?
Just thanks for inviting me to be part of this, and I'm looking forward to Saturday.
Well, thank you, Walter.
For me, Miles, I'll say, Ed, I am looking forward to your keynote, introduction to this Streamathon. Having met you in person at the physical archives, which is what this is really all about. We really got to pull together here, you guys, and keep this physical meeting space for all of us, because I wouldn't have met Ed outside of all Miles' work and being able to maintain that space. So let's rally together. And I'm looking forward, Ed, to what you have to say. Obviously, you have a deep background with all of these subjects, but not having Miles, you organize a physical space where we can shake hands, and one day I'm positive we'll be able to do that again. That's really what this is about. So let's go ahead and let's keep this preserved, because none of this is possible without that kind of an environment. So thanks, Miles, and thank you, Ed. I'm looking forward to it.
You bet. Thank you. And if I could just leave a little thought in your mind, and it's very practical. It's called monthly giving. So I'm a donor to Anomaly Archives. When I first came up, I heard Nick Redfern give a talk about his work on alien abductions, and I was in it. So I had to be there with the stories about the black helicopters and all that. And I was of course, it was a great talk by Nick and great audience, and so impressed by going into the archives and seeing how beautifully organized they are, and what a deep, rich depth of, that's redundant, but, incredible variety of material going back to the earliest days of American researchers. So it's so valuable. I wanted to help, and I'm happy and honored to be a board member. And in my other life, I'm development director for Southwest School of Arts. So I am a professional fundraiser and strategic planner. And so don't get intimidated by the idea of having to, maybe you want to give and you want to give more than you can. Remember, you can give it monthly. And there's a little utility on the Facebook page where I did that. So, it makes it easier. So please think about giving, and, you'll really make a difference. So thank you.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Walter, for joining us tonight. We had also invited our other Saturday lecture presenters. Some of them said they might be able to make it. One person who couldn't make it is getting ready for his own interview on a different radio program, but which I'm going to promote right now, because hey, it's all about helping each other out. Ken Gerhard, the Texas cryptozoologist, is going to be on The Outer Realm tonight. That's at uprntalkradio.com. And really just appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and especially coming out for this event coming up. And guys, stick around, and we can chat off air. And I'm going to wrap up, and I'll bring us back after I end the show.
Thank you so much, Miles.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Walter.